This is
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
God bless you all. Big news yesterday is the House passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act. Of course, we'll be making good trouble this Saturday at the Lincoln Memorial in the name of John Lewis, making good trouble. MakeGoodTroubleRally.com. We invite you to go there. It took quite a while for the House to pass this legislation with no Republican support, of course. Nevertheless, it did pass. So now we have the For the People Act. Now we have the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act. We have both of these pieces of legislation, and the ball is in the Senate's court. Now, also the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill has been passed. It's really interesting to me. That's what government is supposed to do. People really don't understand history. We talk about reparations, and one of the reasons for reparations is because the infrastructure programs that came after slavery, after the period of enslavement, were exclusively for white Americans. It built the white middle class, but it's as if white folk don't know that. I mean, maybe they actually do believe, and maybe it happens. I don't know. Maybe it's like they can get like actual money deposited into their bank accounts without lifting a finger. I don't know. But what we do know is that infrastructure investment, real wealth investment in white communities has created generational wealth. On the infrastructure piece, that's jobs. Who's against jobs? Who's against people making money? And Lord knows this infrastructure needs to be rebuilt, because if you travel around the world and see what's going on in other countries and the way they're being built, oh my God. And this doesn't even include, I don't even know if it really even includes high-speed rail. I'm not sure, but other countries of the world, high-speed rail is happening. All types of infrastructure events, major infrastructure events are happening, are taking place, and are making a difference. But folks, Republicans don't want infrastructure in this country. I mean, they literally don't, because it's not as if they're just mad at the Democrats for doing it. Like, in some political context, people want to prevent the other party from doing something that they really want to do themselves. Trump was in office and he didn't do it. Biden talks about human infrastructure. Well, John Lewis came from a group of people, him being a descendant himself of enslaved people. He spoke up, and now this bill has been passed in his name, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, or the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act. Two big bills passed in Congress just yesterday. Now, what we know about this bill is that it will restore 4 and 5 of the Voting Rights Act that the Supreme Court knocked down. And we need it now more than ever, as voter suppression is raging, getting worse. All of these pieces of legislation around the country in state legislatures are bringing about a new form of voter suppression. And what the John Lewis Voting Rights Act would do, see, this is why they're able to do it. I want everybody to understand this. These other states are able to change all of these voting laws because there's no more Section 4, which was the formula to determine a state's level of discrimination, and Section 5, the pre-clearance requirement to review changes in states with a history of voter suppression. That the John Lewis Act would restore Section 4 and Section 5. So in states that have a history. Now, John Roberts said that there should have been a sunset, or there should be a sunset when it comes to pre-clearance. So there was a new formula written in this law, to not only deal with that, but to deal with updated, newer examples of voter suppression. Because it's the game done changed. Jim Crow is now James Crow Esquire. So you have all of these bills in these individual states. That's why down ballot, local and state elections are so important. 25 states have enacted 54 laws to expand voting access. But 18 states have enacted 30 laws that restrict voting access. That's what we're up against. That's what the battle is all about. That's what we're dealing with. And there are more to come. There are more to come. So we've got to be in this fight. We've got to stay in this fight. That's why we're making good trouble on Saturday. MakeGoodTroubleRally.com. We invite you to check out the website. Join us if you're in DC or watch online. That's what you're welcome to do. But this is good news. So what's Joe Manchin going to do? Is he going to do the right thing? Is he going to see this through, or is he going to continue to interpose and nullify, as Dr. King said in 1963 at the Lincoln Memorial, where we'll be, in the very place he stood? This is affecting elections everywhere. Texas is a purple state. Texas could be straight up blue if there were voting protections in Texas. Texas should be blue. Here's Beto O'Rourke on Texas.
And again, Representative Hinojosa and her colleagues did that. They forced this issue onto the public agenda, and they forced the president to respond to that. We need to keep that pressure up until this thing gets passed, because if we don't, it's unfortunately going to get much worse in Texas. This god-awful agenda that you just described in the special session, you'll see something like that in the next special session, in the next regular session, and we will lose the ability to put us in these important positions of public trust. So, Mr. President, please get the For the People Act and John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act passed as quickly as you can.
The other thing, too, is Joe Biden. Joe Biden is problematic because he's still holding on to the filibuster. Democrats are holding on to the filibuster for fear of losing the majority. So why not just do a carve out? Why not just come up with a formula? So they ended the filibuster. They carved out the filibuster for judicial nominations. Why can't you do that for our rights? Why can't you do that for our rights? That would be the thing to do. More MIP after this message. Here's Joe Biden on the John Lewis Act.
I also want to thank everyone who voted to support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Advancing it's an act to restore and expand voting protections, prevent voter suppression, and assure the most sacred of American rights: the right to vote freely, the right to vote fairly, and the right to have your vote counted. House's Act. The Senate also has to join them and send this important bill to my desk. I think everyone would say.
Joe Biden on the Voting Rights Act. But Joe, you've got to do something about this filibuster, man. No choice. There has got to be a carve out so that our voting rights can be protected. There really is no other option. That's the only way this is going to work. Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
Now, the Supreme Court gutted critical protections of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Today, we are restoring that constitutional right that so many states are taking away from Black and brown people, rural people, people of color, everyone. Sooner or later, it'll be all of us who will be subject to these voter restrictive acts. So make no mistake, these are efforts to turn the clock back to the days of Jim Crow. That's not something I'm imagining. Let me tell you, I vividly remember, as one who was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. So I too salute our Texas legislators for their boldness in protecting the right to vote. H.R. 4 can restore these crucial protections.
The Voting Rights Advancement Act, named after John Lewis. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning, Reverend Barber, myself and others, LaTosha Brown of Black Voters Matter, Barbara Arnwine of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Virginia Case of the League of Women Voters, and others will meet with Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
I think our colleagues will all agree that many wonderful honors are afforded us as members of Congress. I can think of none that is more poignant than being here today to be able to speak on an important issue named for John Lewis. It's almost a religious experience because of the sanctity of the vote, which is greatly at risk. Our colleagues have mentioned some of the assaults on voting that have taken place, and to undermine what we are, a democracy. Where we talk about the preamble, where 230 years ago our founders gave us guidance and words. We are establishing a government in which the people, not a king, would shape their own destiny. Ever since Americans have fought real on that promise, we're all citizens while enshrining in the Constitution the 13th and 15th Amendments and the 19th Amendment, which we are celebrating this week, to expand voting rights to women, passing landmark civil and voting rights protections, including the Voting Rights Act. Right here in this very chamber, the Voting Rights Act was passed. President Lyndon Johnson spoke there in a beautiful speech, the We Shall Overcome speech, in which he called the VRA's passage the history of this country in large measure is a history of what is right for all of our people. We all know that the story of America is a story of ever-expanding freedom. Yet today, that story and those rights are under threat from a targeted, brazen, and partisan campaign to deny Americans the ballot. This campaign is anti-democratic, it's dangerous, and it demands action. Today, the House will pass H.R. 4, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, to combat this anti-democratic tide. This bill restores the power of the Voting Rights Act, as President Johnson said, one of the most monumental laws in the entire history of American freedom. Any diminishment of the Voting Rights Act is a diminishment of our democracy. In America, the right to vote must never, ever be compromised.
More MIP after this message. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, some of us going to meet with her this morning. This is very important. You know, Dr. King called Jim Crow a psychological bird. Jim Crow's most devastating impact was on our voting rights. And so it's time to carve up Jim Crow, carve up even the filibuster that keeps voter suppression alive. That is what is going on right now. We are dealing with voter suppression because the filibuster keeps it alive. Bishop Barber.
It's time for a reset in how we are viewing the current debate for the ending of the filibuster, passing of the For the People Act that was actually written by John Lewis with his last breath, restoring and expanding the Voting Rights Act, and passing a $15 hour minimum wage. It is time to view these things through the lens of our deepest constitutional and moral values in order to preserve the soul, the economic justice, and the future possibilities of this nation. As long as this struggle is framed as Republicans who are concerned about election integrity, which is a lie, versus Democrats who want to encourage a turnout that favors their party, America is descending and will continue to descend into a hyper-partisan dysfunction which will continue to cost our democracy. We are in a moral crisis and a constitutional crisis. We must reclaim voting rights and living wages and addressing poverty as moral issues that make good economic sense. We call on the president to go to Texas, go to Arizona, go to West Virginia, and then go to the well of the Congress and let the nation know we must have three infrastructures protected. The infrastructure of our roads, our bridges, and our ports. The infrastructure of our democracy, voting rights, and access to the ballot. And the infrastructure that lifts our daily lives, which is our living wages. We must have all three infrastructures to keep the possibility and the future of this democracy from crumbling. This is not even anymore about whether Democrats will win or whether Republicans will win. It's not whether Democrats will be or whether Republicans will be in this moment. It's really about whether America will be. That's the question. That's the question.
Bishop Barber, Poor People's Campaign, repairers of the breach, will go in and meet with the Speaker of the House this very morning, and then this Wednesday morning, then report back to you. In the meantime, go to makegoodtroublerally.com to find out more about Saturday. Hope you'll be there. Even if you join us virtually, that's fine. That'll be something. We're going to make some good trouble.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.